From the European Crafts Alliance, this is Craft Matters, the podcast that explores craft, the artistry, the industry, and the soul of making. And now, here's your host, Adriana.
When we look at a crafted piece, we see the finished object. We notice the shine of the metal and the beauty of the design. But what we don't see is everything that came before. The time it takes, the repetition, and the quiet refinements that slowly bring a piece to life. In this episode, our guest is the München-based goldsmith Pura Ferreiro. Since the early 1990s, she has specialized in granulation, an ancient and technically demanding technique where tiny spheres of gold are one by one fused onto a surface to create delicate patterns. Pura trained as a master goldsmith, later completed degrees in art history and archaeology. She has spent over 30 years building her own independent practice. Her work has been shown around Europe and overseas. It has been featured in publications, and in 2026 she has been awarded the Hessian State Prize for German Arts and Crafts. Pura works only with recycled gold and silver and teaches the technique of granulation to the next generation. But beyond the awards and exhibitions lies a bigger question. What does it take to make a living from this level of mastery in Europe today? In this episode of Craft Matters, we talk about the reality behind high-quality craft, the invisible labor, the pressure to grow, the responsibility of sustainable production, and what it takes to build a life around precision. Hi Pura, welcome. Could you briefly introduce yourself, who you are and what you do?
Hi Adriana. Thank you for inviting me to this interview, and thank you for the nice introduction. I am working as a goldsmith since 1984. When I started my career with an apprenticeship at the Vocational School Academy for Jewellery in Kaufbeuren, Neugabeland. It's a little jewellery town in the south of Germany, in Bavaria. And still nowadays, I'm working as a goldsmith.
One of the techniques you are known for is granulation. What exactly is it?
Granulation is a more than 4,500 years old decorative surface technique in the field of goldsmithing. The first pieces of granulated jewellery were found in the archaeological excavations of the King's Grave in Mesopotamia, today's Iraq. For me, granulation is the most beautiful among all goldsmithing techniques.
Wow, it's amazing to hear that granulation is such an old technique and, well, is it still alive today through contemporary makers like you? And I think many listeners may be hearing about this technique for the first time. So how did you discover it or how did you learn it?
I always loved doing things with my hands and being creative. For me, becoming a goldsmith was the perfect combination of art and craft. I discovered granulation when I visited an exhibition in the Goldsmith House in Hanau in Germany in 1989. It was an exhibition from Elisabeth Tresco, one of the most famous granulation artists at the beginning of the 20th century. And I was so impressed of her work that I decided to learn this technique. At this time, at the Master School for Gold and Silversmith in Munich, there was a teacher, Mr. Klein, who promised me before I applied for the school that he will introduce me to the secrets of granulation. And so I went to Munich for 2 years to learn how to manage this fascinating technique.
Okay. Well, it's fascinating that something that you first saw in a museum later became your life's work. And what's already clear is that your work sits at the intersection of technique, history, and artistic vision. So after more than 30 years working with granulation, what keeps you so fascinated to a technique that is incredibly demanding and slow?
Exactly that, what you asked me right now. It's a slow technique. You need a lot of patience. It's demanding. And if the final results are good and all the restraints have been overcome, it's very fulfilling and satisfying. As it's so demanding, it's never boring because there's always something new to discover.
Yes, and I think it's very interesting because even after more than 30 years, the technique still seems to inspire and challenge you. It sounds like the challenge is part of the fascination. And of course, that level of dedication also has a cost in terms of time. So, when someone sees one of your pieces, they might not realize how long it takes to make them. Roughly, how many hours does it take to create a single jewelry piece? And how do you explain the cost of those invisible hours to a client?
That's a very good question. I'm often asked, and I usually explain the time consuming and costly work involved with an insight. I say that this or that piece takes me around 2 or 4 or many more hours, plus 30 years of experience, because it's all about practicing.
So, thinking about the people who connect with that value, who are your main clients? And I don't know, who typically wears Pura Ferreiro jewelry?
I think that granulation is to be discovered as a second glance, as it's so petite. But if someone has discovered granulation, people are first astonished, and then very often they fall in love with the fineness and the very special beauty of this technique. My main customers, clients, are craft enthusiasts, private customers, and also galleries owners who want something unique, one of a kind, complex, and just something unusual and special.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It sounds like your clients are not just buying an object, they understand time, care, and craftsmanship. That leads to the broader business question, because having the right client is one thing, but building a sustainable business around this kind of work is another. So, do you think high quality crafts works well in today's economy, or do we need a different way to understand its value? How do you build a sustainable business around something that simply cannot be rushed?
As I mentioned before, you need a lot of patience for granulation. And I think I also needed a lot of patience to make my living from what I do. To never give up, not to take the easy way out, to create constantly new pieces, to be ambitious in a good way. That's how it works still today.
It sounds like a constant balancing act. There is the artistic side, but also the practical intelligence behind making it viable. And I imagine your business model has also changed over time. Speaking of that, you run a shop on your own for a while, and now you are sharing the space with other artists. What has this change in your business been like for you, both personally and professionally?
19 years ago, I decided not to work alone any longer, and I started working with other jewelers in a workshop and gallery. And I think that was the best decision I ever took. I do not collaborate with other craft people or artists in my proper work, but I collaborate in everything that is around goldsmithing. Sharing the studio, for example, working with others is inspiring. It helps me to keep the costs low, and it's nice to have a work family. When you have creative questions, you can ask your colleagues. When we plan exhibitions, we do it together. And so all this around work, all this around the proper work of goldsmithing is not so exhausting.
Yeah, and I think that craft can be such a solitary profession. So I can imagine that sharing a space with others brings a very different energy for your daily life. And speaking of change, the market has changed a lot since you started with social media, online platforms. Have digital tools helped your business, or do you still prefer fairs and face-to-face connections?
Well, social media to me is getting very important and every day more important. I stopped going to trade fairs after Corona. And now, when I have new pieces or finished a new collection, I send images via email to my galleries and also to private clients, from which I know they love what I do and want to be informed about new pieces. And I also try to keep my website updated and to post new works on Instagram. But I also love to receive people in our workshop and gallery. By the way, our gallery is called tragbar, what means wearable in German. And that's exactly what we do in our workshop and gallery. We make wearable jewellery on a very high level.
That's true that digital tools bring us new opportunities, but maybe it's not just to decide one or the other, but a balance between both digital and face-to-face connections. Another aspect of your work I'd like to highlight is your relationship with materials. You work mainly with recycled silver and gold, right? Is there a choice you make on purpose, or is it also because it's easier to find more sustainable customers' demand? Tell us a little bit about that.
I started working with recycled gold and silver many years ago, and it was a clear decision. I think that in our profession, we have not so many possibilities to do something for environmental protection. And using recycled materials is something we can do, and we should do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it feels very coherent with the depth and responsibility of your practice. At the end, it shows that excellence is not only about aesthetics, but also about ethics. And before we come to the end, I'd like to ask about the emotional and economic resilience this kind of work requires. Over 30 years, have there been moments where you looked at the economic aspect of your practice and questioned if you can afford to continue? What kept you going?
Also, that was very clear from the beginning, that the way I work would never make me a rich person. But this was never important for me. I earn enough to make my living. I love what I do, and that keeps me going. And with the granulation technique, I found a small, but for me, very well-fitting niche. And I prefer to do something that satisfies me instead of making a lot of money with a boring job.
I completely understand. Thank you for sharing that so honestly, Pura. I think it offers a very real picture of what it means to build a life in crafts, choosing purpose and deep personal satisfaction over financial success. And I'm sure that many makers will recognize themselves in that way. And that brings us to our last question. As you mentioned before, your granulation teacher played a very important role in your journey, and now you are teaching there yourself. How important is dedication to you, especially when it comes to preparing the next generation? What do you think matters most in training today?
I was very fortunate to have very good teachers from the beginning of my career. And when my former teacher, Jörg Opaskalski from the vocational school, where I started goldsmithing, he asked me if I like to give a granulation workshop to the students of the last year of the apprenticeship. And I immediately said yes, I would like to do that. I never regret this decision. I'm now doing these workshops since more than 10 years. And it's a very nice experience to see the fascination for granulation growing while my students are intending to manage this difficult technique. As I said before, it's so satisfying when it works after a few attempts, and then you have a piece of gold jewellery with a beautiful pattern on it that reflects the incoming light the most beautiful way. It makes you feel lucky, and I think the students hopefully feel the same.
Absolutely. And they are very lucky to have you. It really feels like a full circle moment that That must be incredibly satisfying. Well, Pura, thank you for your time, your stories, and for sharing your mastery with us. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Excellence is not just an artistic choice, it is also an economic commitment. It is about educating your clients, taking responsibility of your materials, and having the courage to work slowly. If you want to see examples of Pura's incredible granulation work, you can find the links in the episode notes.
You've been listening to Craft Matters, brought to you by the European Crafts Alliance. This podcast is part of the CraftsNet project, co-funded by the European Union. New episodes drop on the last Wednesday of every month. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite platform. Follow us on social media or subscribe to our newsletter at europeancraftsalliance.org. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.